ॐ तव कथामृतम् तप्तजीवनम् कविभिरीरितम् कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलम् श्रीमदाततम् भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जना. Sorry for the little disruption. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We will continue the study with the devotees at Dakshineshwar. Sri Ramakrishna's conversation continues. God has given to some greater power than to others. In one man, you see it as the light of a lamp, in another as the light of a torch. One word of Vidyasagar's revealed to me the utmost limit of his intelligence. When I told him of the different manifestations of God's power in different beings, he said to me, "Sir, has God then given greater power to some than to others?" At once I said, "Yes, certainly he has. If there are not different degrees of manifestation of his power, then why should your name be known far and wide? You see, we have come to you after hearing of your knowledge and compassion. You haven't grown two horns, have you?" With all his fame and erudition, Vidyasagar said such a childish thing as, "Has God given greater power to some than to others?" Now we will find it was the some norm of the day, that this belief that God has given that God has created all men equal. So it originates from the phrase that all men are created equal. This originates from the Declaration of Independence, and it embodies the foundational ideals of equality and rights in American democracy. It's there in the charter. This Thomas Jefferson, when he constituted the American this charter, the charter of the democracy, there it's mentioned that all men are created equal. And in those days, as we were all as such educated in the university education, influenced by the Western education, so this was the idea that all men are created equal. And from that standpoint, we find Vidyasagar also is asking Sri Ramakrishna. When Sri Ramakrishna says that God has given more power to someone than others, the Vidyasagar immediately asks that question: has God given greater power to some other than the others? So it's a very noble idea. So of course, it's a very noble idea that all men are created equal. But you will find at last it speaks of uniformity. It doesn't recognize unity in diversity. It's very interesting. Sri Ramakrishna is not saying that the divine is in some and it is not in others. He's just saying in essence, he is there in everyone, but the difference is in the manifestation. In essence, he is there everywhere. So in the Bengali, the exact word "bibhu rupe tini sarvatra achen, shaktir tartam" is just the difference is in the manifestation of the power. So in essence, everyone is divine. That Sri Ramakrishna is not denying. But what he's saying, that the manifestation of the divinity is not the same in all. So these are the two beliefs, that God has created all men equal. And here we find Sri Ramakrishna is saying that his power is manifested differently in different beings. And what's the consequences of these two thoughts? So all men have created equal. From this, we will find even in American democracy, for the last 200-300 years, they're struggling. It at last ends up in uniformity. When God created all men as equal, you will find that in American democracies, with all its civilization, all its culture, still there are still many proponents who says that by all men equal, the women are excluded. The so-called marginalized population is excluded. That's why this tremendous this movement was there. When Abraham Lincoln at last comes and says, no, that men includes everything, the slaves, the woman, it needed till Abraham Lincoln to really believe in that. Why? Because the majority of the American population was not willing to accept that the so-called the slaves, the marginalized population, the woman, they are not included in that men, that word men. Because now you will find that when you say that all men are created equal, they are really struggling that how can all be included, because they want some uniformity in the society, that all who can be just defined as men with that uniform norms, the code of conduct. In the present day, the still struggle is going on. Most probably the migrants are not considered as men. So that we'll find the same problem is going on now. Why? That when you take that all men are created equal, it's a grand idea to say, but when to practice, you will find as from that the idea of uniformity comes, and then you have to exclude so many. Here, this idea we find is much better, that divine is in all, there's a difference in manifestation. That gives the idea of unity in diversity, that God manifests differently in different beings. No two beings are alike. What to speak of our mental bends, thought of the way we think, even just from the fingerprint you start from the thumbprint. No two men are alike. There's such a tremendous variety. How can we say that two men are alike? That's to accept that variation is to accept the divinity. In the variety lies the signature of the divine. Because as a human being, whatever we create, it is all monotonously uniform. Go to the assembly line of any automobiles. They're all monotonously uniform. Any product, the pen, the whatever products we humans prepare, it's all monotonously very uniform. But there lies the difference of the God's creation. Not two beings are alike, but at the same time, in essence, it is the same divine manifesting as in various ways. So in that case, what happens? There's two things, that you accept the divinity in all beings, and without excluding anyone, try to serve the divinity through all beings. The idea of the Shiva Jnana Jiva Seva comes, and to accept that inherent divinity is in all. We are trying through that service. What we are trying? That to progress spiritually ourselves, and to help others also to manifest the divinity more and more. So it speaks of inclusivity. No one is actually denied the right, the privileges of this in this society. So Sri Ramakrishna is saying that there's a difference in manifestation. It's not that all beings are just same. They're in essence, there's Vibhu Rupet in Ishwarvatra, but difference lies in the manifestation. So the truth is that when the fisherman draws his net, he first catches big fish like trout and carp. Then he stirs up the mud with his feet, and small fish come out, minnows, mudfish, and so on. So also, unless a man knows God, minnows and the like gradually comes out from within him. what can one achieve through mere scholarship? So unless one have realized this very important thing, in all the spiritual traditions, a man of realization alone is empathetic. That empathy comes from the bottom of his heart. He has seen the divine within and without. In the ultimate realization, he has went to some sort of this unitary experience. In all the religious tradition, we find that in essence, the divinity is there in each and every being. It's a realization of the saints, the seers, the prophets. And we find the manifestation of the empathy. It doesn't need any propaganda, no agenda. That's why still Jesus rules the heart of the people. Still all the prophets rule the heart of the people. In spite of the fact they have been persecuted, they are the one who are still ruling the heart of the people. Not all the so-called, declarations which we find have been taken after all political turmoil. After the World War I, when the peace treaty was signed, Holy Mother was in Udbodhan, Calcutta. Someone came and gave the news that the war has stopped. There won't be any more war. The peace treaty has been signed. Immediately the mother's reaction was there. These are all coming from their lips. Is it coming from their heart? There's a simple word. All comes from their lips. Is it coming from their heart? So unless that realization is there, that all those declarations have no value, at last we find that what he's saying, that we may talk big, at last our action speaks, that all the meanness is still there within. So at the beginning, one or two big fishes the fisherman has caught, and then all this minnows, everything starts coming up, mudfish and other things. What it speaks of, that unless the mind has been cleansed through that spiritual transformation, a just mere academic education, by imposing certain, the conceptual idea on the humanity, then no reformation can be done. Reformation cannot be from top to bottom. It has to be from the bottom to top. No reformation can be from without to within. It has to be from within to without. Otherwise, that's the thing we find everywhere. With all the big declarations, at last we find it's all hypocrisy and hypocrisy alone. At last, it's all ends up in meanness. The so-called big declarations at last ends up in some type of state ritualism. We need not go to the specifics. But when it comes to the think of the real welfare of the people, we find most of us are extremely apathetic and cruel as per the real, this benefit of the entire humanity is concerned. It's not there. A lot of discriminations do come into picture in spite of all our big words, tall talks. At last, in our practice, we find all those minnows and mudfish are coming out. So the real thing needs the transformation through spiritual realization. Without that, all the reformation is just trying to impose from top to bottom, from outside on us. It is not from within to without. So that's why the truth is that when the fisherman draws his net, he first catches big fish like trout and carp, and then he stirs up the mud with his feet, and small fish come out, minnows, mudfish, and so on. So also, unless a man knows God, minnows and like gradually come out from within him. What can one achieve through mere scholarship? Sri Ramakrishna was resting in his room Sunday, June 17, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna was resting in his room in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar. It was afternoon. Adhar and M arrived and saluted the master. A tantric devotee also came in. Rakhal, Hajra, and Ramlal were staying with Sri Ramakrishna, master to the devotees. Why shouldn't one be able to attain spirituality living the life of a householder? But it is extremely difficult. Sages like Janaka entered the world after attaining knowledge, but still the world is a place of terror. Even a detached householder has to be careful. Once Janaka bent down his head at the sight of a Bhairavi. He shrank from seeing a woman. The Bhairavi said to him, Janaka, I see you have not yet attained knowledge. You still differentiate between man and woman. So even the genders are attributes. They are not the self. The self is beyond all attributes. In the core of our being, there is no differentiation. We are all that pure conscious principle. And when through the mind and the senses, we are trying to relate to that conscious principle, we are projecting all the attributes from our mind and all the differentiation comes. So, but in essence, there is no as such difference. That's why Swamiji always used to say that the more we try to relate to the core of our being, all the such differentiation falls off. Until we have done that, that speaks of what? It speaks of our ignorance, that we are yet to realize. We still have that body consciousness. If the consciousness is not identified with the soul, it is still identified with the body. And as long as it is identified with the body, the question of distinction of the gender do come into existence. A small child doesn't have any sense of body. And that's why we find that it is that having that innocence, that purity, there is no sense of the body. It doesn't distinguish between a male and a female. It is yet to have that body consciousness. For a child, the consciousness is diffused. Even in psychology, modern psychology, they say it takes time for that consciousness to concretize into the form of ego. As long as it has not concretized as the ego, it is very diffused consciousness. That's why you will find a small child just thinks everything conscious. It will be standing in front of a pillar and just talking. You have seen that. It just thinks everything. Its consciousness is diffused. It takes time. And it is the society which gradually brings him to this egocentric consciousness. And with that comes a sense of the body. And with that comes a sense of the gender. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. As long as we are householder, by householder means we are in the society, being bound by the norms of the society. We are bound to be, to a certain extent, body consciousness. We are body conscious. And then all those distinctions do adhere to us, even if it may be just a trace, but it has to be there. To follow the social norms, it has to be there. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying that King Janaka, who is known as Videha, that he is the one who is beyond the sense that he is body. But as he being the king, as he is ruling over the kingdom, we find that subconsciously the sense that he is a male, he is his gender is a man, that still remains with him. And that's why seeing the woman, he feels a bit embarrassed. He just lowers his eyes. And the Bhairavi then immediately says, seeing that, but you are yet to attain that knowledge. You'll find that once the sense of the body falls off, then this question of embarrassment is no more there. Seeing a small child, no one feels embarrassed. Be it a male or a female, no one feels embarrassed. There's a nice story of Shukadeva in the Bhagavatam, that after being born, he was born with that tremendous dispassion. He was not ready to take birth. He took birth at the age of 18. And then the moment he was born, as he was extremely dispassionate to the world, he started running, fleeing from his family, from his father, from his mother. So Vyasa, his father, was so concerned because he was so much infatuated by the son. It's very natural. So he was running after him. And Vyasa was running after him, and it so happened that Shukadeva, as he was just born as a young man of 18 years age, and he was just born, he was fully naked, he was running by the side of a reservoir where all the celestial nymphs were bathing. Naturally, they were without clothes. And Shukadeva passed, an 18-year-old young person, fully naked, running by the side of the reservoir. And Vyasa from distance saw that no one was in any way disturbed. And Vyasa, in his endeavor to get hold of his child, of his son, who was following him, when he came near the reservoir, all these celestial nymphs, they felt shy. They immediately tried to cover themselves with cloth. And seeing that, Vyasa was extremely surprised. He was taken aback. How come? My son, who is 18 years old, is a young man. He is running naked, and no one seems to be in any way disturbed. And I'm an old man. And seeing me, they are all feeling so much embarrassed, that feeling shy. And so he asked that how come it is that seeing me, an old man, you are feeling shy, and seeing my young son, you are in no way perturbed. And then all these celestial nymphs, what they said was something which opened Vyasa's eye. They told that your son, though he is young, but he has no body consciousness. He is extremely pure. He's running without clothes, without it, just like a small child. He has no sense of body. So we don't feel any shy seeing him. It's very interesting. Even if I still remember that someone have shown us the video of these Andaman tribals. So now they're without clothes. And when you see, you find your mind is not at all disturbed, because that's how they live. They don't have that sense of tremendous, this beauty with their body. It is just like any other creatures, animals, it is just a body. They have no such sense. And when you see them, you also find that your mind is in no way disturbed. It is a tremendous, our own body consciousness that creates that sense of shyness, embarrassment in others, and even in us. And that's what Vyasa realized, that he, though he is quite spiritually advanced, but he still has that body consciousness. And that's why seeing him, others feel shy. But Shukadeva, who is without body consciousness, no one feels in any way embarrassed or shy. So that's the thing which we find here also is indicated, that if you feel that sense of embarrassment, and that shows that you still have that body consciousness. You are not yet identified with the self. And that's being indicated by Sri Ramakrishna here, that even a detached house towel, that's why has to be careful. Once Janaka bent down his head at the sight of a Bhairavi, he shrank from seeing a woman. The Bhairavi said to him, Janaka, I see you have not yet attained knowledge. You still differentiate between man and woman. So you are still yet to realize that in essence, everyone is self. All things are the attributes which, when the self is trying to relate to this world through the mind and the senses, those attributes are thrown out, projected out by the mind and senses. But the self as such is beyond all that attributes. It is just ease, asti, bhati, priya. It's that easiness. It's just exists, but we can in no way define by any such attributes. And the question of gender doesn't come in the self naturally, as there is no attributes. If you move about in a room filled with soot, you will soil your body, however slightly, no matter how clever you may be. I have seen householder devotees filled with spiritual emotion while performing their daily worship, wearing their silk cloths. They maintain that attitude even until they take their refreshments after the worship. But afterwards, they become their old selves again. they display their rajasic and tamasic natures. So this idea we find in so many other places in the gospel. That, see, again, Sri Ramakrishna is indicating a trait of a realized soul. The one who has realized that the self is the essence behind the entire existence. So for him, the demarcation of the secular and the spiritual has fallen off. For us, there is a watertight compartment. There's a watertight compartment between the secular and the spiritual. That when I am in the shrine, I am meditating, I am doing some ritualistic worship, this all speaks of interaction with the divine. The moment I am out of my shrine, I am out of this my meditation seat, everything else is secular. I am just dealing with the world. Because we don't have that eye of wisdom. The third eye is a significant thing. That the devas who are shown with the third eye, what it speaks of, there's the eye of the wisdom with which you see the essence within each and every being, the spirituality. And when you see that, then there is no question of demarcation of the secular and the spiritual. Then everything becomes worship. When I'm in the shrine, I am worshipping. When out of the shrine, relating with the world, I'm actually relating with the divine and divine alone. So this demarcation falls off for most of us. As long as we are in the household, we are in the samsara, our mind is yet to attain that state of unitary experience. We are bound to differentiate. What to speak of the gender, previously, which Sri Ramakrishna was indicating. We differentiate by gender, we differentiate between secular and spiritual, we differentiate that the entire world as not the self, only my exclusive spiritual practices, and that relates to the self. Everything else as if is non-self. So everywhere that differentiation happens, because my mind is yet to attain that purity. That's, I am in a room which is full of soot. Soot means this, and that soot is going to tarnish me, however careful I may be. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of that purity of mind, which helps us to develop the tremendous detachment. And that only can take us to that unitary experience. And then only all the distinctions can fall off. So I have seen householder devotees filled with spiritual emotion while performing their daily worship, wearing their silk cloths. They maintain that attitude even until they take their refreshments after the worship. But afterwards, they become their old selves again. They display their rajasic and tamasic natures. Sattva begets bhakti. Even bhakti has three aspects: sattva, rajas, and tamas. The sattva of bhakti is pure sattva. When a devotee acquires it, he doesn't direct his mind to anything but God. He pays only as much attention to his body as is absolutely necessary for its protection. So what the sattva speaks of? The spontaneity. That when that devotion has developed, your mind is spontaneously attracted towards God because of the devotion. That speaks of the manifestation of the sattva. So here Sri Ramakrishna is saying that the sattva, the sattva of bhakti is pure sattva. So a bhakta who has developed that sattvic temperament, that devotion, where the preparatory devotion has now transformed into raga anuga bhakti, raga anuga bhakti, the devotion which is followed by raga, by tremendous attachment towards God, the devotion, the tremendous raga towards God. Anuga means to follow, the bhakti that follows the raga, raga anuga. So that once the devotion, this manifests through the life of the devotee, then his devotion becomes spontaneous. Such type of sattva is pure sattva. Why is pure sattva? In a very simple way, we can understand that when we try to meditate, two things happen. As my mind was never calm, for the first time it became little calm, it goes to a state of torpidity. That is tamas, lethargy, sleepiness. Sometimes we think we are in a very high state of meditation, but actually we are just drowsing, nothing else. That is tamas. And somehow, if I have calmed down my mind a little, it goes to the state of tamas. Otherwise, it is restless. That speaks of rajasikata. So when I'm trying to keep my mind calm, either we find it is restless, full of rajasic tendencies, or it is becoming tamasic. Just to keep the mind aware without by stopping all the restlessness, and at the same time not going to the state of that drowsiness, torpidity. My mind is alert but calm. That speaks of the sattvic temperament. So that's the pure sattva, Vishuddha sattva. So a devotee who has developed a spontaneous devotion towards God, he alone can, or she alone can, enjoy that type of contemplation, where the mind is fully aware of the divine consciousness, but it's not going to the state of torpidity. It's not going to the state of lethargy. So this alertness with full, clear vision, without any distraction in one side, or without any dullness on the other side. So that's the pure sattva. The sattva bhakti is a pure sattva. When a devotee acquires it, he doesn't direct his mind to anything but God. So now the sarvarthata, the distractions of the mind, has ripened into ekagrata, ekavritti, ishtavritti. The only one vritti in the mind is the ishtavritti. He is constantly in the presence of the divine. He pays only as much attention to his body as is absolutely necessary for its protection. So that's the thing, that to enjoy the bliss of contemplation, I have to take the care of the body. If the body is not in proper state, that my mind comes down to the physical level of awareness. And that's why, just to enjoy the bliss of meditation, the bare necessity for taking care of the body, that much I do, not more than that. So this is the thing which Sri Ramakrishna is saying. But that is not the highest state. That after that there is another state. Just to enjoy the bliss of that sattvic meditation, even beyond that, there is a state, the state of the Paramahansa, which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, that you have attained that ishtavritti, that ekagrata, sarvarthat has fallen off. But that's not all. You have to evolve still further. And that's the state of the Paramahansa. But a Paramahansa is beyond the three gunas. Though they exist in him, yet they are practically non-existent. Like a child, he is not under the control of any of the gunas. That is why Paramahansas allow small children to come near them in order to assume their nature. So, as Swami Vivekananda used to say, that a golden chain is also a chain. That for the one who gets that para vairagya, extreme detachment, that to enjoy the bliss of contemplation, that's a very high state. But there are a few. They find that that also is a type of attachment, though very subtle attachment, but very high, sublime attachment, but still it's an attachment. So they want to transcend that too. And that's where it takes you to the state of that, the nirvikalpa samadhi, where you go beyond that bliss. In the Yoga Shastra, they speak of going to the state of nirodha, from ekagrata to the state of nirodha, where the mind collapses and makes you identified with the self. And when from that state you come back, what happens? You will find your vision has totally changed. Why? That as in the Yoga Sutra, Shastra is very nicely said, it has been indicated that we have two types of vrittis, or the mental, all the modulations. Our mind is constantly in the state of flux. Each and every modulation we will find, these vrittis, all these modulations can be categorized into two categories at last. What? Jnana vritti, and another is this klishta vritti. Jnana vritti, klishta vritti. What is this? There are certain modulations which only gives us knowledge without any emotive faculty coming in association with it. I'm just passing through a street, someone just passes by me, I don't know that person. I see him, I recognize him as a person, but no emotive faculty is involved in it. It is just the jnana vritti. But if it happens that one of my friend, after a long time I see him and tremendously elated, what happens? That jnana vritti, that knowledge I'm getting, that is, this is a person. But with this person, my emotive faculty also gets interlinked. So before realization, most of our vrittis are associated, most of the vrittis, all the vrittis are of course jnana vritti, but a majority of them are associated with that bhoga vritti or that klishta vritti. Klishta means that resonates in klesha, in the form of raga, dvesha, avinivesha. By seeing that, I either develop attachment or hatred or fear. These are the three ways the emotive faculties works. So all our perceptions are associated with that. When you go to the realization, perception is still there, but it has got detached from all the emotive faculties. We can understand that. Our Swamiji gives that example. This example, we quote it again and again. He was passing through the desert as a wandering monk. He was thirsty. He saw the mirage, took it to be a reservoir. Just see, the emotive faculty was still working. As he thought it to be real, that vritti, the jnana vritti, that reservoir is the jnana vritti, though it is delusional, but still it gives a type of knowledge. And that knowledge is linked with the emotive faculty of attachment. He is moving towards it. And then the delusion falls off. He realizes it's mirage. Next day again, he's passing through the desert. And again, he sees it. Today, only the jnana vritti is there. The emotive faculty has fallen off because we have realized that it is a mere projection, the superimposition. So, for a Paramahamsa, that's the thing which has happened. The emotive faculties have got separated from the so-called these perceptions. All the perceptions is linked with the emotive faculty that has got separated. And that's what we find in a child before puberty. The child, that the innocence of the child, that gradually starts vanishing once he reaches the puberty. Before puberty, that innocence speaks of the jnana vritti he has developed. He knows this is this is that, but it is yet to get linked with that emotive faculty. And that speaks of the childlike nature. Now, very interesting. In this world, opposite poles look alike. We cannot see a very high frequency light. We cannot see a low frequency light. Infrared light we cannot see. We cannot see the ultraviolet light. But they are pole apart. The ultraviolet light can burn our skin. It can cause skin cancer. Infrared light is very mild. At night, when I feel the temperature has fallen, it is still permeated with that infrared light. Nocturnal animals can see with the help of that. We cannot see. It cannot burn us. So, but both are invisible. We cannot see low frequency sound. We cannot hear high frequency sound. We cannot hear low frequency sound. So you'll find the extreme polarities, poles always look alike, but they are actually pole apart. So the innocence of a child and the purity of a Paramahamsa, they look alike. Why? Because the emotive faculty, what is the common thing? The emotive faculty is yet to get associated with the jnana vritti, with the perceptual faculty of the child. And for a Paramahamsa, it has been consciously removed. It's no more there. They both look same, but they're poles apart. One is established in the wisdom, and one is it's one's mind is still, because is yet to go to the state of adolescence, is in state of innocence. It's not purity, it is just innocence. And the other has attained that extreme purity. So they are poles apart, they look alike. But here Sri Ramakrishna is saying that the Paramahansa skip the children. Why? Because in the gospel, Sri Ramakrishna indicates a nice thing, that a custard apple made of clay, it enkindles in our mind the real custard apple. Even in our center, there are so many toys for the children. And there are some, this imitation apples, some fruits are there. And if you come, I can show you the bite marks. The children thought it to be real and just have bitten all these toys. What it speaks, there's the words of the Ramakrishna, the clay custard apple enkindles us the the idea of the real custard apple. So here, these children acts like, for why the Paramahansa keeps them near them? Because they're like that clay custard apple, which will enkindle the idea of the real custard apple in the Paramahansa. That what is the similarity? That the purity which happens when you detach the perceptual faculty from the emotive faculty. That enters in the purity. These are poles apart. This is because of innocence, and the others has attained by wisdom to go on to that state. But seeing the custard apple, clay custard apple, the idea of that highest state is enkindled. And that's why the Paramahansas allow the small children to come near them in order to assume their nature. So that's a wonderful idea. So that's what is the idea of pratika, pratima. That something which is not, that the clay image is not God. Is not God. But what we remove the clay, just the idea of the clay, and think that after all, it is the divine who is permeating the entire universe. So he permeates this image also. And with my devotion, that thing manifests more vividly in that image. It is called Archavatara. I see the Lord there. I don't see the clay anymore. So this is the idea of the pratika, pratima, that limit of x, where x tends to infinity, if for all practical purposes can be taken as infinity. So here's the clays. The limit is this clayness, but it tends to the infinity. With my meditation, I am trying to see the divinity which permeates the entire creation, is permeating this too. It is, after all, the divine which is appearing as this. So when I'm trying to see that, x is tending to infinity, and for all practical purposes, it is to be taken as infinity. And that's the idea of all the idols. Here, the small child is also acting like an idol. He is not a Paramahansa. But when I am trying to contemplate on the child, the idea of the Paramahansa, that becomes the pratika, the pratima, which helps me to relate to that highest spiritual ideal in the form of extreme detachment. And that's the state of the Paramahansa, which has been spoken of by Sri Ramakrishna here. So a Paramahansa wants to go beyond all the three gunas. He is no more attached to any of the gunas. That he wants to become one with the self. So there are few. It's not bad that idea of devotion is very good. That there are many who don't want to become sugar, but who wants to taste the sugar. They want to keep the distinction. That's good. That also speaks of a high spiritual realization. But as in the God's creation, as we were saying, that there's a variety in the creation, that we need not just say that all the spirituality should be restricted to that. There are few who wants to transcend that state and to be one with the self, going beyond all dualities. And that's the state of the Paramahansa, which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, and which, when you from that state, you can transcend all the three gunas, because your emotive faculty has got totally dissociated from your perceptual faculty because of your that ultimate spiritual realization. So Paramahansas may not lay things up, But this rule does not apply to the householders. They must provide for the families. So a Paramahansa is aware of his real nature and is in no more bound to the physical needs. That he doesn't, try to, Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, he doesn't lay up things, doesn't store things, lay things up. Why? Because he knows he is the self. Why we store things? To sustain this body. We are identified with this psychophysical existence. And naturally, the question of its sustenance comes. The one who is always identified with the self, his attitude becomes, he's just like in the words of Ramakrishna, jhorer etopata, like a dried leaf blown by the wind. This psychophysical existence, by God's will, has came into existence. By its will, it is being carried, just like the dried leaf in the wind. And the self which is behind it is in no way associated with it. So he has lost all his inclination to take special care of it. Let the wind take it wherever it takes. He is not bothered about it. If he gets food, he is happy. If he doesn't get, he is still happy because he knows today or tomorrow this will fall off like a dried leaf. But in essence, he is the self that is in no way affected. So the total sense of resignation has come. That he is in no way have any such endeavor to take care of his body. And that's why the question of storing things comes. So that's a very high state. And that's the state which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. That for a man of realization, that complete resignation has come. Because he is always identified with the self. Such a person alone can practice non-resistance. As long as we have body consciousness, practicing non-resistance is not practical, because that will be an hypocrisy. I have the feeling that I am the body, and just verbally I am saying I don't resist or anything because I am totally non-violent, but inwardly constant endeavor is there to preserve this body, because still I am associated with it. How can I practice non-resistance? That's why Sri Ramakrishna says that for such a person, he shouldn't harm others, but he should at least hiss. He shouldn't inflict poison. He should hiss. But the one who has been identified with the self, whose idea that is not this psychophysical existence, for him, the ideal is non-resistance. It becomes just like that dried leaf taken by the wind wherever it takes. He is no way bothered. The question of storing things doesn't come because he is always identified with the self. So Paramahansas may not lay things up, but this rule does not apply to the householders. They must provide for their families. Tantric devotee. Is a Paramahansa aware of virtue and vice? Master. Keshav Sen also asked that question. I said to him, if I explain that to you, then you won't be able to keep your society together. In that case, we had better stop here, said Keshav. So this idea is very interesting. It needs some discussion. So we will take up again this from this section, that Master's reply that about this virtue and vice, where what he has to say. This idea, we will try to reflect on it again in the next class. So with this, we stop our discussion. Thank you all. Namaskar.